It's good to see everybody here this morning. It was good to see such a crowd at the game night Friday night. About started counting around as at least 18. I may have missed something in the count. I don't know. If you missed out on being there, we hope you'll catch us on the next month's game night. Apparently, a couple hours goes by quick. Uh, some might think if you're holding a little infant that 2 hours is a long time to hold that little one. I didn't even, someone told me I've been holding her for 2 hours. I said, what? Looked at the clock and it was 8 o'clock and I started around 6:15. I'm like, okay. I bring that up not to be able to say that I was able to do that before mine gets here. So yeah, if I'm late on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night, you'll understand why. Apparently, I lose track of time holding on to a little one. But when I think about this lesson about snakes in the camp, I think not only about the devastation that they bring about. If you're familiar with the story, Numbers chapter 21, we'll be turning there in just a moment and looking at what happened. But we also see not just devastation, but we see God's mercy, we see God's love for His people. He gives the people a way of escape. He gives them a way to show His love physically. I think this is the biggest issue we have perhaps in our lives today, and I think even in their time, is that they don't and we don't see God physically. I could see that little baby I was holding. We can see one another. We can call one another if we can't see each other and talk to each other. Email, text, however, whatever. There is so much physical that we're used to, but yet when it comes to God, He is spirit. How do we communicate with the Spirit? I'm physical. I want to see something. I want to taste something. I want to touch something. And so I think it gets interesting, and this is where my mind started going when thinking about the snakes, is that it was a physical representation of our spiritual standing. And I'll get to how that applies here in a minute as we go through the lesson. So Numbers chapter 21, verses 4 through 9 give the account. Then they journeyed, the Israelite people, from Mount Hor to by the way of the Red Sea, to go around the land of Edom. And the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way, and the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread. I think they're being a little dramatic because they go back a few verses, they just got water. They've been given bread the entire time, but we are going to starve to death. Kind of sounds familiar with little ones around. It's like, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm going to starve. You just ate. Perhaps a few of us are like that from time to time, but moving forward. So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that He may take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall be that to every one who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, and so it was. If a serpent had bit anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. We have to realize today that our life has snakes in the camp. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. When we look at this, when did the snakes appear? After the people sinned. We have sins. The snakes here in this representation are showing the sins of the people. We have them. There's no getting around it. The only way around it is to call God a liar. Romans 3:23 says all have sinned And so that includes every person. So the people of the camp were all, lumped together. They said they murmured against him. But the beauty of it is once we realize this fact, we come to terms with it, how serious it is, we now have a decision of how to handle it. We have to acknowledge the issue, and then we can take care of that issue. So as we look at this, we see that this is a symbol of God's punishment and judgment against those who rebelled. Now, he does this in this particular case for us to learn about so we can see what happens. We see in the previous 3 verses that Israel had a little bit of a defeat from the Canaanites, and some of them were held prisoner. And so they took and vowed to God, and then they went and utterly destroyed the city with God's help. They had just had a major victory with God, and then they turn, and all of a sudden it is time to journey again, and they're having to go out of their way. They can't take the direct path. It'd be like saying, let's go from here to Greenville without using Highway 82. You can't use 82. You got to go around. Go around Leland. You cannot go through it. That's what they had to do in verse 4 when it says they journeyed from Mount Hor to by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. The interesting part is if we look backwards, we can see in Genesis 36:1 when it gives Esau's genealogy, it says that he is Edom. The Edomites are from the genealogy of Esau. These are kinfolk, but they won't let them through. The king refused their passage in the previous chapter, and so they are still honoring that agreement. He said, may we walk through your land. We will only stay on the road. We will not veer off. We will not even touch your water. And if one of our animals happens to make a mistake and do that, we will pay you for it. And they were told no by their own kin. They said no. So they went around that time, and now they're going around again this time, and so, the murmurings are coming. They became tired of what God was providing them. He was providing them manna every single day except for on the Sabbath day because they were to take a double portion the day before. They were given all they need, but they were loathsome because they kept on having to eat the same thing. It's free. It's a gift from God. It is what is sustaining you. It's all that was needed. He gave what was there, but they became loathsome. They murmured against God and Moses. And it's very distinct in that they spoke against God and against Moses. Why would you speak against your prophet? Back up to Exodus, and we see where Moses went back to Egypt and demonstrated that he was from God through the signs, and they accepted him. Okay, they murmured against him when the Pharaoh was hard-hearted and caused extra work on him because he said, let's go, and Pharaoh said no. And by the way, and so they had issues with them on and off because they got tired. But yet Moses brought them out of their bondage. Even though the bondage got a little bit harder for a minute, now they're free from all that. They are headed to what they have been promised. They have been promised a promised land, a land so full of joy and wonder, they can't keep their eyes on the prize. Instead of asking what's next, they started complaining against God. Again, they complained. Go back in the previous chapter. They complained because we need water. What are we going to do? Die out here? And Moses struck the rock. Okay, that was Moses' issue. Are they having murmurings now because of his issue? Is that why they were not allowed through Edom? I don't know. It doesn't say specifically. But when we look at this account, we see the physical snakes coming into the camp. Can it not be representative of the spiritual battle that they are facing? When when it comes to the point that you are complaining that God is giving you food every day, giving you enough water to feed the entire population and all of the livestock, do you think that's the only sin that's happening in the camp? I would have veered a guess that there is probably a lot more going on than what we're reading about. If it comes time to murmur against God, there's other things happening as well. But the snakes appear as a temptation and availability to sin. Look all the way back to the Garden of Adam and Eve, what happened with the serpent. When the devil took and was so cunning, he became a dweller on his belly, no legs. We see the sinful actions happening. We see the bite of a venomous snake. When it bites and it releases that venom, it is toxic. If we don't stop the toxin, it will eventually take out the whole body. It starts to kill. It starts to affect us in a negative way. If we let one sin in, does that start to affect us in a negative way? That allows an open door for more to come in? Just like a snake bite. We're standing amongst a bunch of snakes and all of a sudden we get bit by one. How long before the others start biting? How long before the venom starts spreading? God gave Israel a physical issue to let them see their spiritual issues. He put the snakes in the camp. And the snakes bit, and the snakes were poisonous. People were dying. When he looks at this, the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people. They bit the people, and many people of Israel died. If we do not get out of our sins, what will happen to us? Romans 3:23 says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We see, first off, we fall short. If we don't get up and bridge that gap and do what we're supposed to do, Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death. If we don't take care of a poisonous snake bite, it's going to continue to do more and more damage. But God knew this and gave them a way to take care of this issue. They were physically complaining, means that their spirit was far from God. When they realized they had sin in their lives, they realized they were being bitten from the snake and the venom was affecting him, what we do next is important. In 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 9, he tells us, he's recapping some of the historical moments. And in this particular point, at verse 9, he hits to this point, nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by the serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. He recapped multiple things over the history of the nation of Israel, and he hits this one little spot. Don't tempt Christ. Now in the time of Numbers 21, they're tempting God. Christ is part of God. Don't tempt God. Don't tempt Christ, as they were being tempted and destroyed by the serpents. God created all things and has asked us to do very little in return. It is not hard of what he has asked us to do, so why are we complaining and tempting him? Physically, the Israelites were given a way of relief. When we look up to verse 9 back in Numbers 21, we see, so Moses made a bronze serpent. The people kept going to Moses. For the exception of him striking the rock when he was told to speak to it, he was on par with what God wanted him to do. He stayed true to service to God. Moses was the mediator. God told him, make a fiery serpent out of bronze and place it in the center of the camp. And so Moses made the serpent, put it on a pole, and if the serpent had bit anyone, when he looked at it, they would live. The medical insignia used today is a pole with snakes wrapped around it. Kind of coincidental, I think, a little bit, don't we? Someone in the medical field must have read the Bible to figure out how to cure things. Now, today, we can't just look at a bronze serpent. I can't just go find a medical insignia and say, okay, I looked at it, I'm good now. Doesn't work that way today. That was for them at this time. God gave them a way of escape. Forgot to put that verse into here, but we have that verse today that we look at in so many times of trouble that we won't be burdened with more than we can bear. God will provide a way of escape. We have that promise today, but it takes something on our part. It wasn't enough just for Moses to make a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. That was just step one. God told Moses to do it. Moses did it. Moses also put it up so that the people could see it. He didn't cover it and keep it in his coat right here, so that way if he got bit, he could look at it and be good. And all the rest of you are in trouble. He brought it out to the camp and placed it so that it would be available to all. Is Christ not available to all today? Is God available to all the time throughout the history? He provided that way of escape. For those that obeyed the words given by God, we see very specifically. In verse 8, this is the Lord said to Moses, make the fiery serpent and set it on a pole. What extends to everyone, and it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. We see that reiterated in verse 9. If a serpent had bit anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. It's not enough to know that if I go over here to, let's say it's in the field right over here in the center of the camp. That's where he decided to place it. Well, I know he built one, so, I'm good. It'll be all right. No, that was step one. Moses had to build it. It wouldn't do me any good to make one myself and look at it because I wasn't the one commanded to do it. That's a secondary. That's a copy. It's a fake. The real one is over here where Moses placed it. I have to realize that I have sinned. I have to go where I've been told to go and do what I've been told to do. For the people, they were told to go and look upon the brass serpent. Why would I do that if I didn't believe in God? First off, I sinned because I murmured against God, because I've decided that I'm better off than He is. I need to remember that I have to look up to God. And notice that even in this, Jonah and the great fish, when he finally realized, he kept on going down and down when he was running away from God, all the way to the bottom. When he finally realized God, he had to look up where God is. God is up in the heavens. He's always described as up. We have to look up to the bronze serpent that was created on His command to prove our willingness and our faithfulness to look up to Him. Will we look up to the bronze serpent? When they looked, they lived. I'm not going to go and look up on it if I don't think it's going to work. Living comes after the action. The effects of sin went away after the obedience. John chapter 3 verses 14 and 15 say, And Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. There's still a condition. The reflection of the brass serpent being raised up in the wilderness, Christ was raised up for us. We don't look at the brass serpent anymore. We look at Christ. We just partook of the Lord's Supper, remembering His death, burial, and resurrection. Do we believe what we just partook of? In order to be faithful to Him, we have to. We believe that by taking of this, that there were snakes in the camp. There were snakes in my life. They have bitten me. I am poisoned by sin. but I have come to him through obedience. I have looked up to him to be cleansed. I have followed his commands. When I have done that, I can realize we don't hear about all the snakes in the camp anymore. When the people obeyed, they were cleansed. The people that didn't, we saw where some perished. Snakes weren't necessary to stay around and be a full-time remembrance. Today, we don't look up at the bronze serpent. What we do have to remember is why we're looking up and who we're looking up to. And to be careful not to turn that into something it isn't. The people took and changed that brass serpent. They kept it around and started doing things that they weren't supposed to with it. In 2 Kings 18 and verse 4, we see where the brass serpent is broken into pieces by the king because the people were worshiping it. They were burning incense unto it and had a special name just for it. That's not what that was for. And Jerry asked a couple weeks ago if that was an idol. The answer is no. That was a commandment by God. However, what did they do to that piece? They turned it into an idol later on. Then it was no longer acceptable. Can we put idols in the way today? Unfortunately for them, because they did that, God didn't send another wave of snakes in or something else to physically remind them of it. But luckily, he raised up a king that was worthy of being the king, and he went and broke that thing down. Stop worshiping what we're not supposed to. Stop putting things in front of our service to God. The snake entered the camp because there were sins of the people. God allowed a way for escape. He allowed people to not face death from the snake bites, from the venom, from our sins. Today, that way is Jesus Christ. Just like the serpent was raised up in the wilderness, the Son of Man was raised up on the cross. But he rose from the cross, giving us hope. We have the ability to let the snakes depart from us. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Let's resist. Let's cleanse ourselves. Let's get the antidote, which is Christ. He says, "Come, all who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." If we've been snake bitten, I think that would count as weak and heavy laden. Let's go to Christ. Let's get rid of the venom. Let's get rid of the pain and anguish that's within us, and let's live for him anew. You think the people that went and looked upon the brass serpent and were healed and were able to live had an appreciation after that day? At least for a time period. We see the history that keeps on, it'll go for a little while, then it'll repeat itself. Let's give ourselves that extra boost. Let's give ourselves the way to get rid of the snakes. If anyone needs help getting rid of snakes, getting rid of sins, getting rid of the venom, so that we can live a healthy life spiritually, let your needs be known. While together we stand and sing.